and I'll let the judge know what questions come in. And as you just heard, this meeting is being recorded, so for future use for those who were not able to join us. So, Judge, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mateo. God, this is amazing. I didn't expect when we were going to do this that we would have this many people. I'm used to brown bags for the DR section, and we'll have a smaller, much smaller group. So I'm really glad to do this. And I'm sorry everyone's on mute. It's kind of awkward. We're all sitting here, you know, sitting in this room, and there's so many of us who know each other. But if we unleashed the microphones, we would probably have a hard time keeping a focus. So I want to thank Mateo for helping me here with this today. I want to thank the steering committee. He's chair of a steering committee for the dispute resolution section committee. And I want to thank him and Morgan Pettit, who's the staff bar person who also helped pull this together. So I'm thanking them for their help and for everyone from being here. Let's start by showing the poll results. It's interesting. We have looks like down the second question, we have an interesting split. We have about 75% of people who are facilitators or mediators and do mostly face-to-face, and then we have about 20% of people who have done mediations online before. So a lot of folks are, it's sort of the intention of this session today was to give people an opportunity to get online and do some of these things online. So I'm glad that we're hitting that target. And the first question, it looks like some of you have only been on Zoom just today, but most people have either been on it a little bit or on it quite a lot. So I urge you to use this opportunity, particularly if you're new to Zoom, to play with the features. Up in the upper right, you'll see speaker view, and you can see all of the different squares together. So depending on how you click that, you can click on enter full screen mode. And so you may want to do that when I'm sharing my PowerPoint. And so play with these things. You can't break it. And you'll find that you can get different settings that work best for you. I'm going to do some of this by PowerPoint because when I realized we were going to have quite so many people, I thought it would be important to have some structure to it. So let me get that PowerPoint started. And let's see. Mateo, is that working correctly? Good.
Okay, good.
Okay, great. All right, so we are making this shift to online and learning how to do mediation through Zoom. So welcome everybody. I saw this just before I started getting things ready, and I wanted to, let me make some adjustments here. Mateo, is the scroll bar keeps showing up every time someone comes in? Or we're good?
I think you're good.
All right. So I saw this t-shirt online and I thought it was kind of cute about why I do these kind of things. I loved Dr. Seuss when I was a kid, and this t-shirt says, "I will teach you in a room. I will teach you now on Zoom. I will teach you in a house. I will teach you with my mouse. I will teach you here or there. I will teach you because I care." You know, when I was, I loved Dr. Seuss, and I always felt like Dr. Seuss cared. And I think us helping each other, helping everybody is something that is important. And as we deal with the issues that we're dealing with in our society today, we're finding new ways of doing things. And I think what probably many of you have noticed is that if you're trying new ways to do things, sometimes the new ways to do things turn out to be actually better than the old ways. And I don't know that this will end up being better by doing mediation or settlement facilitation on Zoom, but as we go through this today, I think there'll be some arguments that I want to talk to you about as to some of the benefits of doing this even above and beyond doing face-to-face. The program objectives that we want to cover today are these four, actually. We want to understand the context and the options of online mediation and settlement facilitation, comprehend the utility and security of the Zoom platform. I want to go into that with you, and learn about the checklists for going online for a host and for a client, and understand the skills and techniques needed while we're in an online session. So then finally at the end, I hope that will be time for us to answer your questions. There is a chat feature on your menu at the bottom. You'll see where it says chat. If you click on that and there's options, you can chat amongst yourselves privately. But if you put on either to Mateo or to the public, I think Mateo will probably use the everyone question so people can see that the questions are being asked. If you'll just go into the chat session and type any questions that you might have to everyone, and Mateo will be monitoring those questions. So while instead of unmuting people, Mateo can unmute himself and he can read the question if it's pertinent to what I'm talking about at the moment. If it's something that we're going to cover, he may skip over it, or if it's something that's better to wait until the end, he'll skip over it until we get to the end, and then we'll go over and answer the questions at the end as well. So that's how you can interact with us and how you can get your questions answered. The question comes up as to why do people go online for dispute resolution? I started mediating and doing settlement facilitation while I was a judge about 4 years ago. And when I was taking trainings and going to conferences, I started learning about some people who did do mediations online. I actually had a mentor who taught me about working with Zoom, who does all her mediations and settlement facilitations online. She's works with domestic relations with families. She was an attorney. She had been practicing in California, but she moved with her husband to Chicago. She had a license in Massachusetts and California. So she ended up setting up her mediation work with families in divorces and did them almost entirely online through Zoom, her working from Chicago and her clients being in a lot of other different places. And so she's taught me how to do some of this work, and she did it before there was the COVID-19. But of course, since then, since the outbreak of the virus, people have had to social distance and work from home, work isolated from other people. And this has been a way for people to be able to do it. It is worked well. I was talking to Wendy York the other day, one of more prominent mediators and settlement facilitators, and Wendy had done like 25, I think she said, last month online. So it is being done, and it does work. I had one last week that went for 10 hours. It was a guardianship and a conservatorship case out of Taos, and I had about 4 different locations of people in different places in their offices or in their homes. And we worked through the session. It was going to originally only go for 4 hours, but it kept going, and it went for 10 hours. But people did not get too tired. People did not get frustrated. We kept working through it. We had breakout rooms for the various parties to be in, and at the end of 10 hours, we reached a great result. So it does work. And sometimes, as we'll talk about, it can work even better than face-to-face. Now, you have lots of options available to you when you're considering to go online. I'm not paid by Zoom, I'm not promoted by Zoom, and I have no interest in promoting Zoom, but I just found that it works the best, and I'll talk to you about that, why I think that's the case. But on this screen, you'll see there are lots of companies. Blue Jeans was one my son, who's in law school up in Michigan, told me about. They did a lot of their law classes on Blue Jean, and it's pretty similar to Zoom. And the schools seem to like that one. There have also in Google Hangouts, and Facebook has gotten into it recently. When you go into Messenger, you can have your own private rooms. Cisco WebEx, you'll see on television, a lot of folks use that. GoToMeeting is another one. Skype, of course, has been around a long time. And so you'll see those. The court system tends to use Google Hangout Meet more often because that's what they have on their computers. And there's been some concern about using Zoom on the networks for the courts. However, the state of Texas uses Zoom entirely for all of their court work. All of their court hearings are through Zoom. People go on video on Zoom. They can share their exhibits on Zoom, and Zoom has a procedure where they can actually broadcast what's happening on Zoom, if you choose, on a YouTube live channel. And so their courts are being given live access, or the public's been given live access to what the courts are doing through the YouTube live channel that's available if you're doing a Zoom session. So that's the one I'm going to talk about today. There is one called Legaler that I've become familiar with. And if you're an attorney and you want to talk to other attorneys, especially if you use Clio, it integrates really easily with Clio. And so there can be a lot of issues in terms of being able to track your time or track your clients through Clio and Legaler. Legaler is not as convenient for mediators. We tend to not be worrying about billing and time systems and that sort of thing like they do offer on Legaler. But I'm just letting you know about it. So if you are an attorney looking to go online with clients or other attorneys, that could be a good choice for you. Now, Zoom has a lot of benefits for people involved in dispute resolution. The main ones are that it's pretty easy. There's no need for an account. You can do it on a phone. You can do it on a laptop. You can do it on a tablet. You can do it on a regular computer with a camera and microphone. You can wear headphones or not. So it's fairly easy for people to get involved with. You don't have to have an account. You can send a link to your clients to have them just link on to it. The settings are very customizable, and with the ability to customize those settings, you can have a great deal of security and privacy. It's designed to be used by ADR professionals, and it wasn't really just a coincidence that happened. Some of you might know the name Colin Rule. Colin Rule was with Modria. He originally was with eBay, and some of the first eBay online dispute resolution techniques Colin Rule developed at eBay. He went to Modria. He's now with Tyler. Those of you who may be involved in some of the trainings for what's been going on with the online dispute resolution systems that the courts launched might hear of Colin Rule because he's the one that's developed a lot of that. Colin worked with Zoom very early on when they were first getting started. And they asked him, well, what would a person in dispute resolution need? And Colin was the one that convinced them that they should have breakout rooms. They should have easy screen sharing, ability to record or not to record, private chat features with the ability to share files, and the ability to have co-hosts if you're going to have mediations with co-mediators. And so Zoom incorporated a lot of those features, and some of those features are unique to Zoom, which is why it's become kind of a gold standard for people involved in dispute resolution because of the fact that those things mimic a lot of the stuff that we do in real life. If you're going to be involved with this kind of work, you should get a pro license. Zoom has a free basic license. Some of you may have that, and it does a lot of things that you want to be able to do. But the pro license is not very expensive. It's $15 for a month. And you can have, one of the big benefits is instead of having a time limit on your meetings, if you have 3 or more people, your time limits under a basic license is 40 minutes. If you want to go beyond 40 minutes, then you have to sign off and sign back on again, and that's not very professional. And they do define those 3 to 100 as pretty strictly. I was with we were having a Friday night cocktail hour with some friends on Zoom the other day, and we thought it was just the 2 of us on Facebook, but we started getting kicked off at 40 minutes because my friend only had the basic license. Turned out they had logged on with their cell phone first, and I had logged on with my cell phone first before we then switched over to our iPads. And because we went from our cell phones to our iPads, it was reading as if there had been 4 people on that call. And so instead of just the two of us, we got kicked off at 40 minutes because we were 4 devices that had logged on. So that's one of the reasons why you may want to have a pro license. Another reason is, as you'll learn later today, we do have something called a private meeting ID. It's called a PMI in Zoom. And that private meeting number can be customized if you're in the pro license. So I've customized mine. It's a 10-digit number, so I've customized mine so I have my cell phone number, or my iPhone number, I think. But anyway, it's those kind of rooms you only use for quick setups. Like you're talking to a colleague and you'll say, hey, let's hop on Zoom and let's do something real quick. I want to show you something. And so you can quickly give them that number, and then they can log on, and you don't have to go through the process of generating a number and sending an invitation. And if you have your PMI, a number that you can easily remember, then you can share that with people. And then one other feature is, if you're real busy and you're doing a lot of mediations, 3 or 4 a week, you can, and you have an assistant, you can delegate to your assistant the ability to schedule your sessions for you on Zoom, so that you have somebody else who's using your materials or using your features for you. So that was one of the other benefits to having a pro license. But the big question that I think a lot of people come to hear the answer to is Zoom safe? And of course, safety is a relative term. Safety is about choices. Safety is about what risks you're comfortable taking and which ones you're not. There's a lot of just basic cyber hygiene matters that you need to monitor to be able to keep yourself safe. Things like updating software when it's offered, so that you're using the latest versions to make sure that they've plugged any holes or dealt with any issues about hacking ability. And you also want to make sure you back up all of your important files all the time, so that something should go wrong with your computer or something should go wrong, you have a backup to your files. Technology can be risky, especially new technology, but Zoom, ultimately, I've read a number of articles on it, and Zoom is safe. The term end-to-end encryption, this might go in deeper than most people understand, including myself, but end-to-end encryption was controversial because Zoom said they were end-to-end encryption, but what would happen is when the calls would go through the Zoom servers, they would have to decrypt it to be able to do some of the features that they do with the platform, or if they're recording it on the cloud. And so it was not technically end-to-end. Also, if people use telephones, as we'll talk about later today, you can call in instead of using your computer, you can call in by your telephone, and telephone lines aren't encrypted, so you don't have end-to-end encryption for somebody who's using a telephone to call into a meeting. I've put up on the screen the encryption language, TLS 1.2 with advanced encryption standard AES 256-bit. That's the kind of stuff that, you read it, you nod your head and you go, yeah, okay, that sounds pretty impressive. I don't know what it means, but the fact is that Zoom got a lot of criticism, particularly 3 or 4 months ago when people started using Zoom a lot, and even more so when the coronavirus hit. They did have some issues in the past, and they've plugged a lot of those holes. They did it slower than some of the people in the computer world thought was prudent, and so there was some criticism for them of not doing it quickly. So that's most of the news stories you heard in the computer industry was about their slower response to dealing with what had been revealed as some problems. They've apologized for that. They've now gone on to where they, for the next 60 days, are only doing security issues and they're not updating any features. And so I think they've addressed it, and I think that it's a lot safer now than what it was. It's always better if you use zoom.us, which is the main platform, as opposed to the app. So if you're going on to Zoom, if you log into zoom.us, and I'll show you in a minute, there's on the screen an important place where you can update your software. But there is some story. I've heard people say, that Zoom is owned by the Chinese, and that the Chinese are, if you upload it or download it, you're downloading malware, and that they're going to be able to hack into your computer. All of that is not true. That's been debunked. If you go online, you can see debunked stories online, and that's one of them. Nevertheless, the Chinese probably are listening. And if you're talking on your computer and you're talking about nuclear secrets, or you're in a high level of security, you probably don't want to be doing it on Zoom, but you don't want to be doing it on your cell phone either. And what do we talk about on our cell phones that also could be tapped into? Now, for mediation, obviously, it's serious, and settlement facilitation, you need confidentiality, and it is confidential. And as we go through this later today, I'll talk to you more about that. Zoom bombing is something that you've heard a lot about, and Zoom bombing is something to be not really worried about if you're using Zoom for things like settlement facilitation or mediation. Zoom bombing was the unauthorized users interrupting meetings, public meetings mostly, where there had been a broadly sharing of the sign-in information. They would go on and they'd share screens, backgrounds, noises, chats, and sounds with very offensive type language and images. Zoom bombing is easily avoidable by using proper settings. And when you set it up with your meeting sign-in, with your waiting room, with your locking your meeting once it starts, which I'll explain to you how to do, and silencing all participants when they first come into the room, you can really eliminate any real issues with regard to Zoom bombers. So I think that is something that, while it made for good stories, and particularly you had stories like the FBI was involved because it was a lot of hate language was in there in some of those public rooms, and so that was an issue. But I think it's not an issue when we're talking about using it in this professional setting. Here's some checklists for you and for how to set up a meeting. And I already mentioned, if you go to zoom.us, and there you can check for software updates. Let me show you this screen, and that's let me get my cursor, if I can, up here. I guess you can see this right here. It says download, and the first one. Anytime you sign into the Zoom platform, you can have these banners across the top, and it will tell you about the encryption. It'll tell you how to download, and they'll give you a link to download your latest Zoom platform and make sure that you have all of your software aided. You also have, this is where the PMI, I was telling you down here, your PMI number is given to you, and you can log in and make sure that all of your account information is currently up to date. When you're creating a meeting in Zoom through the software, when you log on and you say you want to create a meeting, they'll give you options and ways to set up options for the meeting room. As you go through those, looking down through the list of options that they'll ask you if you want to have a password for the meeting. It's usually a good idea to say yes, that you want a password for the meeting. You can also create your own password, so do something like mediate, or something that would be relatable and easy to remember, and something your clients would remember. You can also enable what's called one click, where the password is embedded in the click that you're sending them to invite them to join the meeting. Now, of course, that sounds like it's sort of defeating the purpose of having a password. Because the Zoom meetings are identified by 10 numbers, hackers could create, I guess, combination of numbers and find your meeting by some chance. So by creating a meeting room with a password, you're disabling that possibility. You can make it more difficult for your clients to get on when you have a password, and so you might decide you don't want to do that. Part of the issue is how widely disseminated is your login information, and if you're sharing your login information privately with your clients, then you're not likely to have to worry about having a password. You should always enable your waiting room. There'll be a place, and I'll show it to you later today, where you can click on the menu when you're setting up a meeting that talks about whether you want to enable the waiting room. You can personalize your waiting room, so you can have your picture, you can have a title as to what people are joining, and let me see, I can show you that. That's what it looks like on a waiting room. Welcome to the mediation session. I'm still setting up the room. You can customize it. It's a little awkward. They don't have it so that it looks really, really good when you're typing it. Your picture can be on there. But that way, when people come into your room and they first see your waiting room, they know they're in the right place. And then you can say on there, please wait, and you'll be joining everybody at the same time. And then there's some links down at the bottom where they can check their camera and check their microphone. If you also use the setting, you have a setting that can decide whether or not you want to be able to have the meetings recorded. I don't think that recording meetings, for the most part, for a mediation that's confidential, is a good idea. Even a settlement facilitation is confidential. And so recording is kind of antithetical to that. Some people think recording is a good idea because then you'll remember what was said. But my practice when I do mediations is to never record anything. If you are going to have a meeting where you're recording something, it's usually better to record it onto your computer and not onto the cloud, because then it goes in directly straight into your computer, and it's not out there where somebody who's fishing around in a cloud somewhere could perhaps mistakenly come across it. Microphones can be muted on entry, so that helps stop Zoom bombing. And you can, there's something called virtual background. Some of you may know about this. If you go to your Zoom video menu, and I'll show you in a few minutes where that is, you can activate a virtual background. Some of you may have that. And your computer can put the picture of Golden Gate Bridge behind you instead of your dirty pile of clothes. So they have that feature. If you disable that, that's how some Zoom bombers, they were using pornographic backgrounds, that sort of thing, as a way of offending people. And you can disable that feature. So let's talk about security. Once people are in the waiting room, you only admit people from the waiting room, the people you know. And so you bring people from the waiting room, and there'll be a security button on the menu for the room. And if you click on that security button, you can lock the room. And so when I'm doing settlement facilitation or mediation, I always tell people once everybody's in that we are locking the room. And that way people feel safe. They know that no one else can come in. Once you lock the room, you got to remember it's locked. I had a situation once where somebody left because they had some technical issues. They left the space, they signed off, and then they went to sign back on again, and they couldn't even get in my waiting room because I had locked the room. So they had to text me and ask me to unlock the room so they could come in. So keep that in mind. You can mute and unmute participants through the button on the lower left corner of your control bar. And you also have the chat feature. The chat feature, you want to, the reason I put that on a checklist while you're preparing for a meeting is you can control that. Chat, you have different features of chat. You can chat privately back and forth with people who are in the room, and it's private. It's like texting somebody on a cell phone. You can also do it to everybody in the room. If you're in a true mediation situation where it's the mediator and the two people who are talking to the mediator, you don't really want them cross-talking to you privately. Anything that they have to say, you want them to be able to say to you in person. So in a true mediation setting, you probably want to disable that chat, and you can disable that with your controls. And so you disable the chat feature. You can also make it so they can only chat to the host. So if you want to have a situation where you only want them to be able to talk to you, where I find it to be the most useful in settlement facilitation is where you have the attorney and their client, and you've all been probably in settlements where, you know, attorneys and clients are passing notes back and forth, writing notes on notepads and handing them to each other, and privately communicating that way while they're in a room with some other people. And chat allows you to be able to do that. Of course, if they're in a breakout room, which we'll talk about next, you aren't going to need to be able to have chat back and forth. But if you're in a large room where there's more people, it can be a very convenient feature. Before you're starting a session, before you go on to a Zoom meeting, there are some things you should do. You know, use the bathroom, get yourself comfortable, get some tea and some water, because you're going to be sitting in front of your computer for a few hours. And you want to make sure you have everything you need. You turn off your ringer or disconnect your desk phone, and you silence your cell phone. I have a desk phone right next to my computer, and sometimes I forget to disconnect that or turn the ringer down. And in the meeting, middle of a meeting, my phone starts ringing, and then my tape voice comes on, and they can hear the messages that are being kept, and I'm scrambling to try to stop all of that in the middle of a meeting. So take care of that before you go on. Notify families and others if you're working from home or even in an office that you don't want to be interrupted, that you're going to be busy. Turn off your computer's on-screen and audio notifications. Now, what that is, you know, a lot of times you'll have things where your computer will send you images. You just got an email, you just got a text, and so it'll come across your computer screen, or it'll make a noise, an alert sound. The same thing happens on your cell phone. You want to disable those so that you're not having those interrupt your sessions. You want to check your microphone and video links before the session to make sure they're working properly. Make sure you're dressed appropriately. Being dressed appropriately is important when you're being a professional and you're in meetings. You know, you don't want to show up in your bathrobe. You don't want to show up in a t-shirt. And so it's important for you to keep that in mind. Your hair's combed, that you're checking your background image, that you're projecting the right image that you want to show to people. If you're going to be sharing screens from your documents from your screen, you want to prepare the documents you want to share and have them easily on your screen so that when you go to share them, they're there. Put away things you don't want people to see, because as you're scrambling around trying to show people what's on your screen or what's on your computer, you know, inadvertently a document that might be confidential or, you know, embarrassing comes on, or emails might come on. So put those away by tucking them away, closing down those apps and closing down those software programs that you're not going to be using, so that something doesn't pop up that you don't want to share on your screen. And also finally, make sure all your devices are fully charged. If you're going to be relying on your cell phone as an emergency backup communication system, or have people calling you or texting you on your cell phone, make sure it's charged well, because if you're going on for hours at a time and it's not able to be plugged in, then that's not good. I had them share with you some documents. One was this PowerPoint, so you'll have the PowerPoint to refer to later. I also shared this online mediation guide, hint, tips, and tricks. Those are all things that you want to be able to share with your participants ahead of time, things you want them to know. You want to be sure to discuss with them and make sure that they understand about confidentiality, that they can't have someone else sitting in the living room listening to what's going on if it's a confidential mediation or settlement facilitation. You want them to know what to do if technology fails. They should have your cell phone number so they can call you or text you. Make sure that they understand the proper use of chat, so you don't have them improperly sending digging chat messages to the other side and embarrassing you and them. Then you want to talk to them about the use of breakout rooms. So I like to have a tea or a coffee beforehand, a day or two before the mediation or the settlement facilitation. I will make an appointment to go online and just make the clients comfortable and answer their questions about the different parts of the platform they may not understand, show them how breakout rooms work so that they know that they have confidence to know that when they're in a breakout room, they're in privacy. Show them how to make sure that they can mute their microphones, mute their cameras if they don't want to be on camera. And so I'll have this tea with them. I often consider having my pre-mediation or my pre-session meeting with each attorney on Zoom, either as part of that client tea or afterwards. I'll have the attorneys and the clients on for a while, and then if I want to talk to the attorney separately about the session, I'll have my pre-mediation meeting with them on Zoom, because then we're getting familiar with the platform. They're getting familiar with you, and it becomes much easier. One thing that I often consider, and I'll ask during a pre-mediation meeting, is whether a staggered start time would be more comfortable. Sometimes, particularly if you're doing domestic relations cases and domestic violence situations might be there, where you don't want to have people in the same room, you can do a staggered start time where you might start at 9 o'clock for one side and tell the other side to show up at 9:15. And because they're going into waiting rooms beforehand, you control when they come in. So you can bring one group of set of parties into the main room at 9 o'clock, create a breakout room, put them in a breakout room, and then bring the other set in at 9:15, do a breakout room for them, and the parties never even have to be in the same presence with each other if that's something that would be important. I also use Dropbox as part of my pre-mediation meeting. It used to be that people would email me confidential settlement documents or things they wanted me to see before the session. And as we all know, email is not secure at all. So I create a Dropbox file, and then I can share that. And what I'll do is I'll create a separate file for each mediation I have, and then within that file, I'll create subfiles, and I'll name it by each party's name. And then I'll only give the attorney and maybe the attorney's assistant's email the capability of going into that, putting things in the Dropbox or taking things out. So only the attorney and I have access to that Dropbox, and Dropbox is a very encrypted, confidential platform. And so this way they are not sending things by email where it could get sent awry or interrupted or intercepted, I guess is the right word. And so I'll talk to them about Dropbox during the pre-mediation meeting, or I'll do that in an email and send them a link so that they can then upload documents through Dropbox. Now, that was what to do before you go on to your sessions. Now we're going to go on to Zoom and have a session. And the key to that is to make sure that you explore and know your toolbars. Toolbars they're magical. They can give you all kinds of access to things. The thing about toolbars is, and I think one of the geniuses of Zoom is there's so much that's available to you, but it's not all in your face right at the outset. You have to kind of know where to find them. And so it can be a little bit annoying, but once you learn, say for example, you can see now if you look at your toolbars, this was a slide I'd created sometime earlier, but toolbars change. So I just did a quick snapshot of my toolbar that I had yesterday or day before. And so you can see over here on the left is the mute and unmute button. And so you can mute yourself or unmute yourself. If you're on mute, which is your good practice to stay on mute if you're in a meeting, you can temporarily unmute yourself by reaching down and pressing on your space bar. And if you want to, I don't know if that'll work now since we've muted everybody, but if you press down on your space bar, it's like a walkie-talkie key. So sometimes, you've been in situations where someone asks a question and you're, suddenly wanting to just say yes or, a short 1 or 2 word answer. You don't have to unmute and then remute yourself. You just press down on your space bar and you can talk and then release your space bar and then you're muted again. But there's also behind the mute, unmute, where this little arrow is, you can click on that and it gives you lots of settings with regard to your audio. Same thing with your video. You can stop your video here by clicking on stop video, and that'll keep them from being able to see you on camera. And then there's that double arrow, this arrow right here. You click on that and it gives you all kinds of things. You can do the virtual background. You can do something called the beauty key, where it's supposed to make you look more beautiful. Never worked on me. But there's all kinds of settings for videos. So they're behind those things, and you have to know to be able to explore your key bar. There's that security button I told you. You click on the security button and you can lock the room. You can also report people. If let's see if I can get my little annotation spotlight going here. I've been trying to do that the whole time. Yeah, there we go. You can in the security key, under the security button, you can actually report people to Zoom if you have any kind of problems. Let me see. You manage your participants through this part of your toolbar. The polling that we did before is controlled here. This is your chat control bar button, your share screen, and we'll talk more about share screen in a minute. You can turn on and off the recording this way. You can create breakout rooms. Breakout rooms will only appear if you're the host of the meeting, or if you enable the feature that allows people to create breakout rooms, which you never want to do. Reaction buttons, they only put on their toolbars recently. Reactions are if you're muted, but you want to give a thumbs up, you can click on that. You take a look at that. You can see there's a thumb up and then there's a clapping symbol. And so it's a way to show your reaction to something without unmuting. So if I had 30 people in a room and I said, everybody want to take a break now, you could all show thumbs up. Yeah, let's do that. Or I don't know if they have a thumbs down or not, but with your reaction button, and I during that 10-hour mediation that I told you about last week, settlement facilitation, I got to the end of it and one of the clients interrupted and he said, you know, Judge, I want to do something here. And he hit the reaction button and hit the thumb up. And he says, I've been waiting to do that all day, because we'd reached the end and he was happy. So I think you can see on this slide how there are different slide views, different toolbar views for parties versus the hosts. So if you're managing a meeting, you're going to have different features than what your clients do. But you want to know kind of what your client toolbar looks like, because you're going to have people who are not able to talk to you because they don't know how to unmute themselves, and you got to talk about going to the lower left and unmuting, or they're turning on and off their videos. And so make sure they know how to do all of those things. All right, I'm just going to, real quick, I hope this works. We're going to show a quick video here on breakout rooms.
I don't think we're getting sound.
No sound? Okay. Settings, let me do something real quick. I didn't have that setting for sound, so let me do it again.
Hey everyone, Farah from Zoom here. On this brief video, we're going to show you how you can leverage our breakout room feature to take a large meeting or virtual classroom and split it up into smaller groups or sessions. You'll see that I have already enabled the breakout room feature, which you can find in your settings along the bottom. And that breakout room button will actually be right here. This is a button that only your hosts or co-hosts will be able to see. And right now we don't have a co-host in the session. If I manage my participants, I can hover over Catherine, for example, to make her a co-host. So she'll see this button now as well. When we're ready to split the group into smaller sessions, I can easily click this button to get a pop-up window asking me how many rooms I'd like to assign out and how many participants per room. For this example, it's recommending, since there are 6 people, we can split it up into 2 rooms. I can do this automatically or manually. So if we click on the automatic button, it'll generate those breakout rooms for us. Certainly if there's anyone I want to swap out, maybe I want to move Michael to the other room, I can exchange him for a different participant. Once I'm ready to open all rooms, I'll click this Open All Rooms button, and our participants will be able to join the sessions that we've created for them. So we'll slowly see those people join. One thing that's really important to note is that as a host or a co-host, you can actually hop between the different rooms to talk to the participants. You can see here I have the Join button. Now everybody's left to go to the rooms. I can broadcast a message to everybody and say, wrapping up in 1 minute. And this will broadcast the message, and then I can close the rooms, which gives them a 1-minute timer to rejoin our session. We'll give everybody a second to rejoin, and I'll show you 1 or 2 additional features with breakout rooms. There we go. We can kind of see everybody kind of popping back in. Now everybody's rejoined the main session. You'll see that I have the opportunity to reopen these rooms again, which is really great. If you have a very long session or a very long virtual class, you can split into these virtual smaller groups as often as you'd like. And the additional options here will allow you to automatically close breakout rooms after a specified amount of time. You can also change the countdown timer to be 30 seconds or 2 minutes if you like. I'll show you a setting where you can also pre-assign folks to be in your breakout room before the classroom starts. You'll want to navigate over to the class that's already been created in your Zoom portal. Under the Meetings tab, you can find your meeting. Scrolling all the way to the bottom, you'll see if we open this to re-edit it, I have the opportunity to pre-assign a breakout room here. And I can create the rooms and upload a CSV with all of my participants in advance so that their names are already populated in the room when I start the session. That's basically how you can run breakout rooms. We hope you found this video helpful. If you have any additional questions, please visit us at support.zoom.us. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.
All right. right. Thank you for that. I hope you were able to see that and follow it. But I showed you that video partly to get you introduced to the idea of breakout rooms, but also because I wanted you to show you that there are literally hundreds of these little 3-minute videos. Some of them are longer, 30 minutes or an hour, depending on what you're asking them to teach you. But they're teaching videos on Zoom. So you go to support in zoom.us, and there'll be all these videos on how to set up a meeting, how to set your security systems for your meetings, how to do breakout rooms, how to use the chat feature. And so they're all on there, and they're there for you to use, and I urge you to take advantage of them. Now, breakout rooms, really, some of the features of breakout rooms are used for like a big conference where you maybe have 30, 60, 80 people, and you want to do breakout rooms to have, maybe in a company where you want people to brainstorm ideas for 20 minutes and then come back to you. But they can also be used in a real intimate way for mediation or settlement facilitation. If you consider them just like you would if you're going to have a conference room, and usually if you're doing a session, whether it's at your own office or another attorney's office, you want a room where everybody can fit in the main room, and then you want 2 or 3 breakout rooms depending on how many parties are involved. And you put them in the breakout rooms at the beginning. You'll have them perhaps in the main session for the introduction. If it's a true mediation, you're probably using that main room almost all the time because you're having face-to-face with the parties themselves, and particularly if they're not represented with attorneys. But if you are doing more of a settlement facilitation mode where people are wanting to stay in breakout rooms and wanting the facilitator to go back and forth, you can use the breakout rooms in Zoom just like you would be using in a real live face-to-face situation. So you have the main room, and I use the main room a lot of times to bring people in. I'll go over the confidentiality agreement that I've sent them ahead of time. I'll use my share screen to bring it up on the screen and go over it, make sure everybody understands it and get them to commit to it on the screen. I'll perhaps do an agenda, and I'll show you how to do that perhaps before we're done today, where I'll bring it up on a Word document, and it'll be one sheet of paper, and I'll be typing on their agenda, and I'll say, okay, what are the agendas for this mediation, or what are the agendas for this facilitation? And we'll talk about it. I will have thought about it ahead of time, but we'll type up the items that we need to cover to make sure that we're done everything that we need to do. Ground rules. Often if you're a trained mediator, you want to set ground rules ahead of time. So you can bring up a sheet and type on what the ground rules are as people talk about them. And then you save that document and you have it available to come back up. You can also email it to people or send it to them through the chat feature by sharing a file. So those are all things you can do with the main room. But then once you're in the main room and you decide you want people to want to go to their breakout rooms, I recommend creating the breakout rooms on the fly. I create them right there by hitting that break room or breakout room menu thing. And then on there, it'll give you a dialog box and you can type in, and I name the rooms. So if it's, the name of the client or I name it with their name so they know it's their room. And I create a second room for the second party, third one if I need 3. And then I assign each of the participants to the correct room. And then when I say, okay, we're going to go to our breakout rooms, and I click on that join breakout, everybody is electronically transferred to the breakout rooms. And that's why I usually recommend that if clients and their attorneys, that they be on separate computers, and they'll go, the 2 of them, into the breakout room, where they can then talk to each other confidentially without anybody being able to hear them. They can usually when people are in breakout rooms, as you've been trained in mediation training or settlement facilitation, you give them an assignment while they're in breakout room. Ask them to look at this particular issue or talk about ideas for how to resolve this problem or whatever it is that you want to ask them to be thinking about. And then you can go from the main room into any of the breakout rooms. So you choose which breakout room you're going into. You told them ahead of time where you're going to go. You go into that breakout room. You have your session like you would in a face-to-face facilitation. And when you're done talking to them, usually no more than 15 minutes or so, and then you can pop over to the other breakout room. You can send messages to everybody on the breakout rooms if there's some reason why you want to stop the session or something's going on. So there is ways to communicate with everyone, even though they're in separate rooms, through the chat feature. You can also decide that you're going to all go back into the main room. So then you can stop the breakout rooms. There's a feature on there, it's set to 60 seconds, where you tell people you're going to close out the rooms. The idea is mostly is when you're having breakout sessions, a lot of times in a conference, you want people to wrap up their conversation. I find that kind of annoying. 60 seconds can be a really long time when you're sitting by yourself in the main room waiting for people. So I tend to reduce that down to 30 seconds or 20 seconds just to give people enough time to know that they're going to get moved into the main room. But breakout rooms are secure. You cannot hear or see into a room where you're not already a participant. You know who's in that room because it shows up on your screen that they're there. You can chat does not go between walls, so you can't use the chat feature to talk to people who are in breakout rooms, but they can send a, there's a button in a breakout room that says you need the help of the host. So you click on that and that tells me that they want me to come and talk to them. So I might tell them, on an assignment, spend 15 or 20 minutes talking about this particular issue. When you're ready, let me know by hitting the we're ready for help button on your screen. They'll hit that message pops up on my screen and I know that I need to go into the breakout room. So it's a very dynamic and you can really start thinking about it in three-dimensional ways. And I think that pretty much covers breakout rooms. We're gonna talk more about it later if in the questions for sure, but that's a really important feature of Zoom and one reason why we want to use Zoom. Sharing screen is also easy, and you've seen some of that today when Mateo was sharing his screen at the beginning. I've now been sharing my screen and doing it through my PowerPoint. You just hit on that share screen button that's on there on the toolbar, and you can use it for opening sessions like I talked about before. You can also use it for sharing documents, photos, or videos. If you're having a mediation session and someone wants to say, well, I wish I could show you the picture I have of how the dog looked when he was beaten. Well, you can say, okay, well, you can do that. And if that's appropriate for your session and you want to allow people to share their screen, they can bring it up on their computer and they can share it. Or it might be a document that they want to show, or some diagram or something. If you're talking about a house and maybe there's a diagram of a house, well, then that could be brought up and people could use it. They can annotate on it. You can write on it. You can draw lines on it. You can type on it. And so it's a way for using that. That's one of the reasons why the Texas courts use Zoom for their court sessions, because they can use it for exhibits. You can edit documents in real time, and that's been really helpful for me when I'm doing sessions at the end. I'll bring up, maybe I'll have created a template settlement agreement with the parties' names on it and all the boilerplate, and then I'll have paragraphs 1, 2, and 3 with nothing in them. But we've reached agreements. So I'll bring it up, I'll type on there, or I'll ask one of the attorneys to do it too, depends on what the situation is, but they can type up on there what they want to have in their paragraphs. And if you're preparing it for them, they can say, yes, I like that language, or no, let's change it. Or if you have the other attorneys doing it, they can share screens. You can use your breakout rooms for the attorney rooms. You've all been in situations where the attorneys wanted to meet together, get their heads together to do the final document before you close out the session. You can create a breakout room on the fly just for the attorneys. The attorneys can go in there, put something up on their screen, share it, type it up. When they're ready, they can save it and send it to all the parties and get signatures that way. There's advanced settings where you can actually share your phone or your tablet. You can share something as long as it's Bluetooth, I guess is the term, connected to the computer or to the system that you're doing. One of the people I know who uses this a lot has their iPad that they can share their screen of their iPad because it's next to their computer. And they're able to use the iPad as a white screen, and then they can doodle on it. You also have a white screen feature on Zoom. You can bring up a white screen. The problem with that is you don't have a touch screen ability on that white screen, and I'm a terrible drawer with a mouse, and so it hasn't been very helpful to me, but you can type on it as well. But there's lots and lots of different features on sharing your screen. You need to explore them, and you need to practice to to make sure that you know how it works, and it avoids a lot of embarrassments. And we're getting close to the end here, but let me talk about just sort of the nuances of negotiating online. A lot of things about this that are mostly common sense when you really think about it. I was watching the news last night, and you have professionals, doctors, who go on the news and talk to these anchors, and they're on their computers because no one's doing live-to-live interviews now. And they'll be sitting there looking over like this, and they're talking to a camera, but they're looking at their screen, and so they're not looking in the eye, and they're talking over here, and you think that's really annoying. Or you have somebody who their cameras are way down there, and they're looking up at them like this, and it's just, you're kind of looking up their nose the whole time. Put your camera at eye level. Go get some books out of the bookcase and raise it up if you have to. But you want to be able to look straight into the camera and have them looking at you in the eye, just like you would in a live face-to-face session. If you talk with your hands, learn to bring your hands up higher. I can sit down here and have my hands at my table and move them around, and you can't see it. But if I bring them up here and I'm making my gestures, I'm making my emphasis, then you can see it, and it works a lot better. Same thing goes with leaning back. You can lean back sometimes to show body language that you're kind of taking it all in. Or if you really want to show you're paying close attention, you come in closer. You can use that same kind of body language that you would in person. Silence is golden, even more so on the computer. And so your basic mediation skills, they do work. Reflecting and reframing is even more important online to make sure that they know that you heard them. And keeping the table balanced has a lot of different other meanings when you're doing a mediation through this network. You want to avoid extra chatting, for example. So that's why you mute people when you're coming into the main room. You don't want to be in situations where you're just chatting away with one party thinking no one's hearing you. Suddenly someone comes into that room because they've come out of their breakout rooms, and you're chatting, and it's just inappropriate. So you want to make sure that you're being appropriate, that you use your mute buttons, and you're only talking when you need to be. You can be friendly, you can have chatty sessions. In that 10-hour session, we had a lot of joking around, a lot of time of talking to each other, but you have to be aware of it and how it's working to keep your table balanced. Keeping the platforms equal, what that means is you can have situations in Zoom where some people are using video, some aren't. Some are calling in, some are using their computer to dial in. And you want to have all of your parties pretty much on the same platform. So I have one that I'm setting up for next Monday where one party can't seem to figure out how to get online. So I'm going to say to the other party, okay, we're going to do this as a telephone conference. Both parties are going to call in. I didn't want to be in a situation where I had one party on the phone and one party on the computer, and I could see one party and not the other. And it just makes for an unbalanced situation. And so that's why it's important that you be aware of ways that you want to make sure you're not favoring one side over the other. Let me see if I missed anything on this slide. I already mentioned about breakout rooms, giving them assignments so they're talking amongst themselves and doing work, and not just sitting there kind of being bored waiting. Have a clear understanding of how long you're willing to go. When I first started this, I would always only schedule them for 3 to 4 hours because I always thought that's the longest people could go. I've done this 10-hour one now, and I'm not convinced of that. But people do feel that way, and so I'll often schedule them for 3 or 4 hours. But tell people, to keep the time after that clear. Keep the whole day clear. We'll start at 9. We'll try to stop at noon or 1. But if we need to go into the afternoon, let's do that. And sometimes we'll stop for lunch. I've done this a few times, where we'll stop at 12 or 12:30 or 1 o'clock. We'll break for an hour, have lunch, and you might tell the attorneys they can talk to their clients by phone or whatever if you want them to think about something, and then say, okay, we're going to log back on. With Zoom, you don't have to have a time to end your meeting. They go on as long as you want to keep them on. So that one that I think went 10 hours, I had scheduled it for a 3 or 4 hour meeting, but Zoom won't cut you off. The longest you can go is up to 24 hours, and then obviously you aren't going to want to go that long. So those are kind of the issues when it comes to negotiating online that I've thought about. There, I can go on and on about this topic. There's lots of things that you want to make sure you think about, but I think I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. So let's, Matteo, have you gotten a lot of questions that's come in on this, or?
So far, there are a couple of questions if we're ready for that, and I can mention those. And I am using my space key to unmute. That's a really good tip. Very nice to use. So can you talk about customizing your message in the waiting room? How do you do that?
Yeah, when you're setting up your meeting, when you go into Zoom and you've logged onto your administrative account, there's a tab for setting up a meeting. And when you go into setting up your meeting, in fact, I might be able to, I don't know if I want to do that, but when you go into your Zoom meeting setup, there's a series of click buttons that you can click on and off. And towards the bottom of that series of click buttons, after you're setting up your meeting, is a click button for enabling breakout rooms, and you click yes. That was the question, right, Matteo? How do you repeat the question again? I've kind of lost my train of thought. I want to make sure I'm answering it correctly.
In the when someone's in the waiting room, you showed your customized message with.
Oh, I got sidetracked. I knew that was happening. I've been talking over an hour, and I start losing my train of thought.
Sorry.
Yeah, when you're clicking down to, there is a chat, a breakout section on the same buttons. That's where I got sidetracked. But as you're going down through those choices, when you're setting up a meeting, you want to enable your waiting room because that's a safety thing. So you only want people to go into the waiting room first. And then if you have the pro license, then there's an extra button that says customize it. And so you click yes, and then it gives you a link, and you click and it gives you a screen that looked like that one that I showed you on one of my slides, where you can hit the right button. It's like a little pen button. You click on that and you can type in some things like, your name, what the name of the breakout, what the name of the mediation session is going to be. You can put your picture up there. You can put another little dialog box at the bottom that says something like, hi, I'm setting up the room still. Be patient, I'll be with you soon. And then urge them to check their video and their audio on the links at the bottom of the waiting room. So if you have to have a pro license, it's part of the setting up of your meeting buttons, and you can customize things that way.
Okay. And when you shared the video, how did you exactly do that? Was that in your PowerPoint, or how would somebody go about if they weren't doing a PowerPoint, they wanted to share video? And is sound a separate, did you have to enable the sound separately?
Yes. Yes, I did put it into my PowerPoint so I wouldn't have to go looking for it during the PowerPoint. When Matteo and I were practicing earlier this morning to make sure everything was working, first time I clicked that on the PowerPoint, just like any of you who've done any presentations in any conferences know, it never works. You think you got it all set up in your PowerPoint, and you get to the room and you click on it, and then everybody's standing there looking at you and nothing's working, or you get no sound, or you get this constant little scroll and it never connects to the internet. Well, that was what was happening at the beginning when Matteo and I were checking it this morning. And then later we went back and it was working. So I guess it worked out its connection issues. And so it was working. But there is, under the share screen menu, an extra button that says, one says maximize screen for video, and the other is share your audio. So you have to click both of those if you're wanting to show a video. And I had it set up as a backup on my behind my PowerPoint. I had a YouTube link to that same video. So if I'd gotten to that point in the PowerPoint and it hadn't worked, I could have stopped my screen sharing on the PowerPoint and opened my screen sharing on YouTube and then played the video that way. But I could have, and I had it on my checklist to do, and I didn't. If I would have checked that share sound button, I wouldn't have had to have that glitch where you guys couldn't hear it for a minute. But then what I did when I realized that what had happened is I went to the menu under share screen where it says share your sound as well to your computer, and I clicked on that, and then we were able to share sound.
A couple of questions about breakout rooms. How exactly does the host jump between the breakout rooms?
There's I wish I could show you here, but if you remember on the video, she mentioned that there was a dialogue box where when she appointed people into breakout rooms, and then they all went to their breakout rooms, she could see on the dialogue box who was in what breakout room, and then because they're broken in, and then next to the name of the breakout room, there's a little button called join. So you're the host, you click the join button, and Zoom, you're taken into the breakout room. And you can stay in there as long as you want, talking to the parties in the breakout room. And on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, there'll be a little red words that says leave breakout room, or leave room. I forget how exactly it's worded. But you click on that little red button in the bottom right corner of your screen, and it'll pop you out of the breakout room and into the main room. So if you're in a breakout room, bring up the breakout room dialog box, and you can hit the join for the other breakout room. So you can pop over to the other breakout room without going through the main room. So you can pop back and forth, you know, and I in that 10-hour session, I don't know how many times they'd say, well, are they willing to do this? And I'd say, I don't know, let me go check. And I'd go, boop, I'd be over on the other side. 3 minutes later, I was back, and I'd say, yeah, they said they would do that. And so it just, you know, it's actually easier. I used to joke when I was doing face-to-face mediations that that's how I got my steps, was that I would always wear my Fitbit watch. And especially if the breakout rooms in live sessions were on different floors or down along the hall, I would always say, oh yeah, I'm getting my steps, don't worry, it's fine, I don't mind doing this. But when it's not live face-to-face, but virtual, it's real easy, you just pop back and forth. I had a situation in that 10-hour one where I had a guardian ad litem, and he wasn't really a party, but I had to move him back and forth between the breakout rooms because he needed to talk to them about what his position was going to be if it would have gone to court the next week. And so I was able to assign him to a breakout room and then reassign him to another one. I would meet him in the main room, and then we would talk. So there's lots of creativity, lots of things you can do, and it doesn't take that much practice. You know, what I suggest is you get like your legal assistant, your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your son in law school, or you know, people like that, and you have 4 or 5 people, you create a room and you have people join you, and you say, okay, I'm going to send you all to a breakout room, and then you practice, you know, and it only takes about 2 or 3 sessions of practicing and exploring to be able to do that.
You mentioned the idea of creating a breakout room for attorneys to have their conversations, but this would apply to anyone in a breakout room. Can someone in a breakout room, can they jump to other breakout rooms, or do they have to request that through the host?
They cannot jump on their own. In fact, you can do a setting where they can't leave the breakout room unless you let them. You can enable it so that they can leave it if you want them to be able to, but I tend to leave it the settings so that they can't leave the breakout room, because you want people to, you want to have some predictability. And so you don't want, you know, be having a conversation in the main room with, say, the guardian ad litem, and suddenly the attorney from the other side pops into the room in the middle of your conversation. So you can only bring them out of breakout rooms by hitting the dialog button where it says close breakout rooms. I had a situation where I took somebody out of a breakout room and I couldn't put them back in another breakout room. So what I did was I sent a broadcast message warning everybody, okay, I'm going to disable all the breakout rooms just for a minute so that I can reassign people. I disabled them all, brought everybody back into the main room, and then immediately created them again, and they went back in again. And I was able to then send the guardian ad litem to that 3rd breakout room that I hadn't figured out how to do. So there's workarounds, but for the most part, you just keep using your menus, you keep practicing, and watch videos. Go to YouTube and watch those videos.
And how can participants in the breakout room check to make sure that no one is eavesdropping on their conversation?
Well, I do that during the tea. When I'm having a practice session with a client, you can also, I'm sure, do it during the session, but the only way you can really do it is put them in a breakout room and say, can you see and hear anybody else? And they're going to say no. And I'll say, okay, well, we were just having a conversation in the main room and you couldn't see or hear us because you were in a breakout room. Or could you hear and see the person? I put another person in another breakout room. Could you see and hear them? No, I couldn't. Okay, well, that shows you that breakout rooms are private private and confidential. So you don't have those issues of being able to cross tier. In fact, it's actually better than when you're in a situation in live. I was in a mediation, my last live face-to-face mediation. I found out somewhere in the middle of it, it was a settlements conference, that I was in a breakout room where in the other breakout room, they could hear me talking because the walls were too thin. And so I had to tell people we have to talk more softly because we can hear each other through the wall here in this law office, but in a virtual mediation, that can't happen.
And if you're in a breakout room as a participant, can you see, like on a participant list, who exactly is in the room with you?
You see them because just like you know how many people and who is in this room right now, you see their video or you see their name as a square on the screen. And that is what you would do in a breakout room. If you're in a breakout room and I join you and your attorney are in the breakout room, then you see my video, you see my screen, whether it's just my name or my picture or my live image, you see that when I pop into the breakout room. So and there's no way that someone can be secretly in a breakout room and listening to what someone says. It's just virtually not possible from the way that the system is set up.
All right, any other questions? And while we're watching the chat for questions, I am going to attempt to use the technology here and share the files with you, the PowerPoint presentation and the mediation guide with the tips and hints. So
did those get emailed out ahead of time or no?
I'm not sure if they went out before, since Morgan was having those computer issues. So, but I'm going to put them in the chat and let's see if I can share them that way.
And if anybody has any questions that you want to, or comments that you want to make, I think we still have 10 minutes or so. And if you want to raise your hand, you go to, I haven't done that in a while. Mateo, can you help me with that? Unless you're busy with your other thing. Should be under manage participants.
As the host, you're not going to see it, but under participants, for those participating, you'll see there to raise your hand, and there's a couple of other features under your name.
Yeah, that's one of the more annoying things with regard to this, is that you do have different things that you see as a host than your client sees. So you're trying to, now if you see there a raising the hand thing, I would invite you to raise your hand if you want, and I can unmute you or Mateo can unmute you and you want to make any comments. I see McBride. I just unmuted you. Go ahead. Hi. How do you say your last name? Or is your first name?
Dean.
Dean. All right, Dean. Tell me what's your comment or question?
Well, I just wanted to comment as we're going through. You were talking about using your Dropbox to collect position papers. I'm actually using my, just as a share, I'm using my client management system, which is my case, and I have an intake form, and I send the intake form to both counsel, and then it's just a fill in the blank form, and it comes securely through my cases system. So it's as secure as Dropbox, but it's formatted in a very standard way. So I'm not looking at apples to oranges in terms of those position papers. So yeah. It's just a share of another layer of technology to add to the mix.
Thanks, Deanne. Thanks, Deanne, for that. It's also, I want to say that the Dropbox is not the only one. Microsoft, what's it called? One something shared box. You can do it that way. You can use Google file sharing, where you share files through Google. That's a pretty secure system, and you can share a folder that way. I just use Dropbox because I was used to it, and it was probably the easiest for me to use. And you can, there's also other things that I didn't get into, and I've seen some programs like this where they do get into it. But you can use DocuSign to send documents back and forth to get signatures. You can use Adobe Sign to send documents back and forth to get signatures at the end of a mediation. Some people who train like this, they talk about payment, and they talk about how they use PayPal or Venmo, and they have their accounts in there, and then they provide that to attorneys, or to, if they're doing unrepresented litigants, they can pay by credit card, and they collect payment before the session that way, or after the session. So those are all little tips and things that people probably should know how to do if you're going to go into this as a business. And let's see if anybody else has raised their hand. Anybody else want to comment? Or
Looks like John Burton.
John, can you unmute John for me, Mateo?
Yep.
Go ahead, John. I'm hearing you. John, I think your microphone's somehow messed up. If you go to the mute and the up arrow, you can check and see if your right microphone is selected. Maybe because you're on headphones and your headphones are plugged in. This is the kind of stuff you deal with all the time when you're dealing with this. That is one downside to this system, is the technology occasionally. Try it again, John. I'm showing we should be able to hear you. I don't know why we're not. Sorry, John. Maybe you can type.
You can type in chat, John, to ask your question if you'd like to do that. You're welcome to do that. Quick question for you all. I did add the 2 files to the chat. Did that work? I've never done that before, so let me know if you're able to get it. Okay, I see some thumbs up. Great.
Good. Okay. Yeah, and let me say that I'm here to answer more questions, and we can go till the end of the time, but we're almost at the end of the time. So I'm going to share my screen again here real quick and put up this slide. Let's see. This is my contact information, and you will have that if you got the file sent to you. I sent the PowerPoint, but this is my addresses and my office phone number, my cell phone number. I have my email, my Gmail address there, and my website. On my website, I actually have my availability calendar. So if anybody's looking for any session, you can go on there and see when I'm available. But I urge people to use those to call me if there's any feedback you want to give me about this presentation that you didn't want to do in public. I'm happy to receive those. I haven't done a training like this before. This was the first. I thought it was going to be a smaller group, and it would have been easier to manage a small group, and it could have been more interactive. But I hope to do more of these. I've been talking to Kim about doing them for the First Judicial District's volunteer pool of attorneys. Maybe making it more widely available to attorneys throughout New Mexico. So if you anything in here that you didn't hear that I should cover, or anything that I spent too much time on, or was too confusing, let me know. You can send me an email or give me a phone call. And so that's that. Any last chance for any questions? Anybody want to raise their hand for any comments?
I'd also like to plug the ADR committee at the State Bar. You do not need to be a member of the bar to join the ADR committee. ADR professionals are welcome. So the email that you received regarding this session, if you will send an email to to Morgan, I believe that's her email in the announcement for this session. Send her an email in, and if you want to join, you're certainly welcome to. It's no cost, and you'll receive direct messages about these types of training sessions and brown bag meetings, and we welcome you.
All right. Thank you, April. I appreciate the comment. I'm seeing your, I'm looking down to see your comments, and I don't see any unanswered questions.
There was a question about the recording. We will make it available to Morgan at the State Bar, and she mentioned possibly a way of posting it on the committee's page at the website for the State Bar. So hopefully it will be there if assuming that works out. So that way folks who weren't able to attend today, or if you want to review the video, it should be made available. I wish I had better information than that, but I think it will be made available for you all to watch again.
Great. Well, last closing thing, I guess, would be just to tell people that who have, I see a lot of names on here. I recognize people I know who are very skilled at either mediation or settlement facilitation. And I just want to urge you to try it out. If you've been on the sidelines, not making any money or not doing any work or not being able to volunteer because you're a volunteer mediator and you're not comfortable with the system, just keep working at it. Practice, like I said before. Bring people into your Zoom meeting, set up a meeting and invite your friends and practice and try these things out and explore the options you have when you're setting up meetings. There's two different meeting setups. There's one for the master meeting setups, and it'll be sort of like grandfathered into all your meetings. And then there's a meeting setup for each in particular meeting. So look through those, understand what they are. If you don't understand something, use the support thing and type in something you don't understand, and they'll usually either have an article or a video about it, and then you can learn what it's all about. So doing it is the only real sure way, but I appreciate very much you got your guys' willingness to spend 90 minutes with me and Mateo on this, and it's been my pleasure to do it. Like I said, I like helping people, and I really appreciate everyone's being here. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome. Okay, Mateo, I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.